What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over several tips to hopefully help you stop losing to the Typhoon Blade katana. This is probably the thing I've seen the most complaints about this season. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below what you do to play against the katana. So for starters, obviously this is a melee weapon, so most of these tips are just going to boil down to not be within range of getting meleeed by it. Like, that's the simplest and easiest way to deal with a melee weapon. Obviously that is easier, like much easier said than done for sure. But one thing that I think will go a long way in improving your, ability to play against this weapon or stop losing to it is to not jump on people without getting early damage on them. I think what causes a lot of people to struggle most versus a katana is they just jump on a full HP enemy or push them, get way too close, thinking they'll have some sort of like shotgun and SMG fight, and then they just end up getting smacked with the blade until they're back in the lobby. And if you're full health and your opponent is full health and they're just spamming you with a katana, that's a much more difficult fight for you to play than if you already had like 100+ damage on the person and then you go to push them. And this is often just like a bad habit or a bad play anyways in Fortnite, but especially when we have a really good melee item in the game, you don't really want to be going for things like this as like a default. You may have to push people sometimes without getting early damage. Like, not everything is going to be perfect, but if you limit these situations, you're probably going to limit a lot of the times you end up getting eliminated by the blade. If you open the fight with solid AR tags and then want to push, not only is that like a much safer play and much more likely to work out for you, but if it does turn out they're using the blade, hopefully that initial damage kind of gives you more room to play with in the fight, because a lot of times when you are getting smacked by the blade, it essentially becomes a damage race of like, can you finish them off before they finish you? And if you already have, 100, 150 damage advantage in that fight, oftentimes they might not even go for the melee. They might just continue running away. But having that bonus, advantage makes it to where they're probably going to get less attacks off before you finish them, and you're going to live, hopefully. If I am having to fight a sword user, though, one thing I do like to do is kind of like sprint jump to the side, or, in one direction away from them, and then land in a slide and kind of just spray them with some sort of spray weapon as I'm like sprint jumping into this slide. Because if you sprint jump into a slide, you get like a decent distance anyways just off the jump, but that slide is going to keep your momentum going. And if you're doing that while just spraying them, hopefully they miss an attack or two, and that can sometimes just be the difference maker. If they miss and kind of get somewhat stuck in that animation, it's gonna be easier for you to eliminate them. And just I've found that sprint jumping to either side of them, or hopefully behind them, or just away from them in some way, and then landing in that slide can be a different way to, or decent way to create distance between you and the sword user. By default, I don't think you want to be fighting sword users though. Like, it's a very one-dimensional item in the sense that it's a melee weapon. If you're not very close to them, they can't eliminate you with it, right? So resetting fights using mobility should be the default choice you have in these situations. It can obviously be very difficult, because if they're just actively meleeing you with the katana, oftentimes you can't just escape. That fight is happening. You don't really have a decision at that point. But if you do have the opportunity to use some sort of mobility to get away from them and reset the fight, this is going to be a much better decision typically than just engaging in that damage race while they melee you. And carrying mobility items, I feel like, is just a big deal this season, or it's been a big deal in Fortnite for a long time. But this season, we have some insane mobility items. We have the Void Mask, the Katana, Shockwaves. And I think Shockwaves in general are just great. I love having them. But they're great for this because you throw it down and you're out of there. With the Katana, you have to like kind of sprint jump away. And if you have no stamina, maybe they're allowed to get on you. You're trying to like get away from them with a katana and they also have a katana, like they're probably going to be able to keep pace with you. If you're using the Void Mask and you have to throw the ball and then teleport to it, you can't just do that while they're meleeing, But Shockwaves, you throw it down, you're out of there. You need very little time to get a Shockwave off, and you need very little planning to get a Shockwave off as well. Like the Void Mask, if you already had your portal planted, you could easily TP out of there. But if this is like a bad situation you weren't planned for, the Void Mask isn't going to be as good. So I think Shockwaves are great. I love having them, but I think they're really good at getting away from the katana as well. This is going to be most helpful if you are able to recognize that a player is going to melee you with the sword before they're actually on you, or before it's too late. Like if you see them running at you with the sword, you can kind of either choose to maybe spray them with your AR, get like 50, 70 damage before they get to you, or you just throw a shockwave. You're out of there. You're further from them than you were before. And then now you can maybe, spray them for more damage and get an even greater like advantage on them, especially if they over chase you. Like if they over chase you after you shockwave, that should definitely be a lot of AR damage that you can get on them before they actually get to you. And then another benefit of the shockwaves is that if they're close enough to it when you throw it, like let's say they're about to start meleeing you and you throw a shockwave, you go one direction, they probably just go the other. And I feel like the katana is a very, again, like I said, it's one dimensional, but it's also a very timing based weapon. Like I feel like a lot of people's deaths versus katana is mostly a surprise factor that like, oh, this person has it and they're actually going for the melee race, But if you are able to shockwave and get away, and then now like that person, it's a katana user, you're probably going to play fights versus them differently, and you probably have a better chance at winning those fights. So proactively shockwaving away, especially if you know they're about to be a katana user, just get out of there. That's going to help you lose to it a lot less. But also, even if you're able to get a little separation in the fight, like you only need a little bit of time to get a shockwave off. So I've had times where I do create a little bit of a separation with that like sprint jump into a slide like I talked about earlier, and then I just shockwave away and I'm able to get away and then make the fight something other than just, close range getting smacked by the katana. Also, there's like a knockback effect with this katana, and that's another situation where if they do that to you, that's an opportunity for you to potentially shockwave away and reset that fight. And that's basically the easiest way to play against this. Make it a fight where the katana isn't useful. Since it's so one-dimensional, there's only certain situations where it's good, very up close. And if you're able to get out of that, you shouldn't lose to the katana. Cars can also be somewhat helpful at dealing with melee users. This is something that I recommended in every video when it comes to dealing with melee weapons in Fortnite. This katana can actually damage you through cars, though. I was surprised when I made a recent spectating video and this happened. I think if they do the dash attack and hit the car, they can actually damage you through the car and kind of like fling the car. But I'm pretty sure the regular melee attack, which is what most of the katana users are going to be going for, will be blocked if you actually get in your car. And then one of the struggles when playing against these melee weapons typically is that once you get hit, you like sometimes lose control of your character and you just can't do anything other than just like stand there and get hit. And if you're next to a car when this is happening and you're able to look at the car and get in, since your character basically just teleports into the car if you look at it and are close enough, this can be a way to kind of get out of that like stun lock situation. So anytime there's a melee weapon in the game, I always want to fight those people near my car to hopefully have this as like a potential safety net to get out. But also if the enemy gets into the car with you, now you've created a fight where the melee weapon isn't as good. You can get out and then shoot them through the windows. This is something that's really helpful a lot of times. Or maybe they get in the driver's seat and then you can do the pickaxe trick to them. Again, introducing the car and making it some sort of car fight is something that reduces the likelihood of the melee weapon to actually have impact on the fight. And if you are someone who's used to playing those car fights, you've created a fight where you probably have an advantage because you're more used to it than the other player. And that's why I think cars have been so good in zero build and car fighting has been such a big deal in zero build, because you basically bait the enemy or force the enemy into a fight where you might have much more experience if you are used to playing that playstyle. A lot of people will kind of opt into it and make themselves an easy elimination for you. So I think having cars can be really good. If they don't get in the car with you, you can kind of drive the mid distance, get out and start beaming them. But just having a potential safety net to get out of that stun lock, I think is huge. Also, just being calm, I think, is a big deal. And this is something that it doesn't really help to just say be calm. You kind of have to think about it in the moment. But a lot of times when your people are getting meleeed by the sword, and I do this too, everyone does this, you kind of like panic and you feel like you have to like rush your shots. And if you're using something like the pump shotgun or the Oni shotgun and you miss a shot, even the auto shotgun doesn't have the highest fire rate. But if you're rushing your shots and your aim isn't the greatest because you're kind of like panicking and scared, missing that shot or getting a bad damage shot is so much more of a problem time-wise than taking a little bit of time, being a little bit more careful, and then hitting that shot. It's easier said than done. But in those situations, I feel like if you try to, actively be a little bit more calm, take a little bit more time and make sure your aim is actually on point, that can really benefit you when it comes to dealing with these melee weapons. Because oftentimes, a good pump shot could bail you out of that situation and save your life, but a missed pump shot basically just gives the fight over to them. Like, you have very small windows of time, so you need to make sure you make the most of the opportunity you have with your shotgun. And then the final thing I want to talk about is people have been saying that they try to, get away from the katana users or not fight them up close, but it gets to the point in endgame where the circle is just so small that they can't not be in katana range, And I feel like this is a problem of not getting kills over the course of the game. In public matches, I have very few, if any, games go to very small circles. And the reason why that is because I play more proactive throughout the mid game, or the early and mid game, and get a lot of eliminations typically. And when you do that, there's less people alive in the end game. So if your end games are getting to incredibly small circles to the point where you can't not be in melee range, I feel like a lot of that just comes down to being too passive and not killing people out during the course of the game. Like getting those eliminations in the mid game, not only do you get eliminations, which is cool, you have a higher kill count, but also it makes the rest of your game easier because there's less people alive and you don't go to those super small circles. So I feel like if you're consistently getting to that point in public matches, you're probably playing too passive. Or if you're getting to the point where it's like a small circle with way too many people left alive, that'll happen sometimes. But if that's consistently happening, it's probably because you're playing too passive throughout the course of the game. And if you eliminate these people, earlier on during the game where you have more options to make in the fight and you're not just forced into that very small circle random fight, I think that is better. So if you are consistently getting in those situations in game, I would recommend trying to play a little bit more aggressive during the game, kill the lobby out, and then your end game will be easier. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys found this to be helpful, informative, interesting. As always, if you did, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like some more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.